Hello, and welcome to Overthinking Eurovision Looks Back. I'm Matt Rather. Eurovision has a famous no politics rule. In 2015, the EBU made Armenia change the title of Don't Deny, which seemed like it might be a reference to a certain genocide that just so happened to be observing its centennial. Strangely, they didn't make Armenia change any of the lyrics. But sometimes a political song goes uncensored because no one understood what the singer was talking about. Matt Belinkie, our monetary breakdancer, has the story.
Montenegro became an independent nation in 2006, and its first order of business was for the Football Association of Montenegro to apply to FIFA. The next order of business was applying to the EU. People, find somebody who wants to be with you the way that Montenegrins wanted to be part of the EU. In a 2009 poll, 76.2% of the population was in favor of joining, with only 9.8% against. But in October 2011, the Financial Times poured a little cold Adriatic seawater on Montenegro's bid. Montenegro's record on corruption and cronyism will make ascension a particularly difficult and drawn-out process, in spite of recent efforts to clean up politics and business. A 2010 article in the New York Times was even more blunt. "This country is for sale," said Vanja Kolovic, who leads Mons, a corruption watchdog affiliated with Transparency International. "Montenegro is selling everything it has, and I am just not sure what the country is getting out of all of this."
Port of Montenegro, given it's at the beginning of its development, allows people to get into waterfront property with marina access at a very low cost.
Montenegro was eager to westernize itself and to show that it was a prosperous and modern nation. But there was a perception that the EU viewed the Balkans, and Montenegro in particular, as hopelessly backwards country bumpkins.
Some folk will never eat a skunk, but then again some folk will, like Cletus the slack-jawed yokel.
And then in December 2011, Montenegro's public broadcaster had the brilliant idea of selecting Rambo Amadeus as their representative for Eurovision, and he rode right into this geopolitical mess on the back of a donkey.
Euro, don't be dogmatic, bureaucratic, you need to become pragmatic to stop change climatic.
When Rambo was announced, the broadcaster said, "He's not the typical musician." And this is accurate. Amadeus, whose real name is Ilija Pusic, has recorded over 10 studio albums and explored styles ranging from jazz fusion to drum and bass. He reminds us a lot of Damir Martinovic from Let 3, another guy who blends music, comedy, activism, and general artsiness. Here are a few of Rambo's achievements. In 1989, he hosted an erotic quiz show, Turbo Lilyhip. In 1994, he wrote a musical score for the 1927 silent movie Metropolis by Fritz Lang. In 2003, he voiced Rafiki in the Serbian-language dub of The Lion King. And in 2007, he performed at an alternative rock festival by using 12 concrete mixers to rattle a bunch of actual rocks around. Rambo's greatest claim to fame might be coining the term turbo folk. This style of East meets West music existed long before him, but he is credited with giving it a name in his 2005 track, Turbo Folk. In the lyrics, Rambo explains,
Turbo folk je gorenje naroda. Svako pospješivanje tog sagorjevanja je turbo folk.
He goes on to list things he associates with kitschy entertainment, exploitation, and degradation. Tattoo, piercing, and body art is turbo folk. Car junkyards are turbo folk. Sex trafficking is turbo folk. Eurovision is turbo folk. Wait, what?
Eurovizija je turbo folk.
You might think that a guy who puts Eurovision in the same category as sex trafficking would not be a good person to send to Eurovision, and Rambo certainly thought so too when he got the call from Montenegro's television network. I think the new, young, and ambitious director of RTCG decided to do some kind of shock therapy. He probably thinks there's nothing to lose. I asked him, "Are you sure? Do you know my work?" And he said yes. But in the same interview, Rambo sounded intrigued at the idea of doing something unexpected. I had some other songs laying on the desk, some kitschy disco songs suitable for Eurovision, but I said to myself, that's too easy. Don't act on Eurovision criteria. And he was dead serious about doing things in a way that defied Eurovision convention. In the days leading up to the show, many of the artists performed at a pre-party known as Euro Club. Most just played their official backing track and sang their song. Here's Loreen. Rambo brought on a full band and did an 8-minute free jazz masterclass that had very little to do with the recorded version of Euro. Two things are clear. This guy is a talented musician, and he was not there to win over typical Euro fans. So what was Euro trying to do? First, it's a commentary on Montenegro's relationship to the EU, specifically in the wake of the 2008 debt crisis. And secondly, it's a critique of Eurovision itself. The best way to understand the song's meaning is by watching the video. Rambo rides out of the countryside to a ritzy beach town and tries to make a little money. He sells folk art at the market. He takes photos of tourists. He gives a boat tour of the harbor. He sells olive oil. In the meantime, everyone looks at him with contempt. The people in the convertible, the people on the yacht, the lady in the hot tub where he washes his pits. Nobody wants him there. They might give him money, but they won't give him respect. And the kicker is that after he leaves the town, his donkey immediately eats all his euros. Speaking to Wee Wee Blogs, Rambo explained, "For us, it is quite logical that if you mix donkeys with mega yachts, some euros are going to be eaten." So, not only are the Montenegrins depicted as uncultured hicks, they are uncultured hicks who are either too corrupt or too dumb to benefit from the World Bank's generous loans. In the meantime, the singer is espousing these enlightened liberal Western values.
Don't be skeptic, hermetic, pathetic, analphabetic.
When asked about the super verbose lyrics, Rambo said, "The vocabulary is somewhat scholastic, so small-town professors can feel smart about it." In other words, Rambo is playing a dumb guy's idea of what a smart guy sounds like. Euro is like if Borat was played by an actor actually from Kazakhstan. And this is a role that Rambo has been playing for his entire career. His first hit in 1989 was called Balkan Boy, and the lyrics went, "I am Balkan Boy and I stink of sweat." Euro is basically the Balkan Boy character trying to show how sophisticated he's become over the years and failing. And all the time, he's begging the rich guys for table scraps. This was all super topical. On March 30th, Eurozone finance ministers announced that they were increasing the capacity of their financial rescue fund to 800 billion euros. Let's zoom in a little bit on the song's most interesting musical feature, its melodramatic introduction that feels like it was lifted from a Vincent Price movie. At that time, Eurosceptic was indeed a word to inspire fear. Eurosceptics were anti-globalists, and in 2012, that especially meant being against the coordinated monetary policy of the Eurozone. The rise of right-wing Eurosceptics was a threat to the entire liberal post-war order, and the fact that Angela Merkel even had to explain this to people was a little exasperating to the Davos jet set. Which brings us to Rambo's second word. Analphabetic. There is something fascinating about a word that means illiterate that only the most literate people will understand.
She doesn't even have Sega. She's such a troglodyte.
Cruel, but good word use.
Sort of a double duty insult. And then Rambo has some advice for these simpletons.
Try not to be hermetic.
Another interesting word choice. The first definition is closed off and airtight. So this is addressed at all those Eurosceptic nationalists, right? But the second definition is ancient occult tradition. So this plays on analphabetic, the idea that those people are not just closed off, they are living in the Dark Ages, which seems to be the stereotype Rambo is playing on with his ultra-traditional Montenegrin costume at the beginning of the music video. Eurosceptics are otherized, religious, fanatical, stuck in the Dark Ages. They are boogeymen threatening the collectivist vision of the EU and of Eurovision for that matter. Rambo starts off as one of these figures, only to pivot and become an overly fervent believer in liberal capitalism.
I enjoy cyclism, liberalism, tourism.
It's almost like he's saying, hey, we're not actually like that, we're like you, so please give us money. Both his menacing Eurosceptic and his smug Euro believer are over-the-top parodies of how both sides see each other. You might wonder what the politicians thought of this very political song, and there's a really cool story about that published in a Croatian newspaper. In a recent political diplomatic TV debate, which followed the presentation of the Eurovision entry, Rambo's song was warmly praised by the head of the EU delegation to Montenegro, Leopold Maurer, who described it as an apt illustration of the atmosphere of EU-Montenegro negotiations. He would play Euronero for colleagues so as to enable them to gain a better understanding of the perception of Europe in the Balkans. Now, at Eurovision itself, the song's staging seemed designed to mock the typical Eurovision kitsch that Rambo despised. His breakdancers unroll a giant sign that says Haut habe Hobotnika, which is a mix of German and Serbo-Croatian that means, today I have an octopus. And of course, there's this giant prop.
We saw you on the stage with a sort of Trojan horse, but nothing came out of that.
It's Trojan donkey.
It's a Trojan donkey. And why a donkey?
From Trojan donkey, nothing is going out.
This strikes us as a double metaphor. Certainly it's supposed to represent Rambo, sneaking a political message into Eurovision right under everyone's nose. But it also might be a critique of Eurovision itself. Because if you watch our video on the 4 ways Eurovision gets political, you know the whole thing exists largely to export liberal Western values to the rest of the world. Rambo totally got this. In a pre-show interview, he sneered, "It's not a music festival at all. It's some kind of diplomacy course, preparing for public opinion and discussing the European culture." Getting back to the staging, one of his breakdancers, dressed in red shorts and a beanie, seems to represent the Balkans. His other 2 dancers, in dark suits and sunglasses, might be the humorless forces of Western capital. At the end of the song, they wrap up the Balkan boy in the octopus sign and carry him away. So the themes from the music video are still there on stage if you squint hard enough. As Rambo explained to Time magazine, the song is directed to everyone feeling a bit nervous about not being able to understand things like the financial roots of the Eurozone crisis. I am looking forward to their vote. Now, of course, Rambo never believed any of this was going to connect with Eurovision audiences. We know this because he said it right in the song.
Euro, I got no ambition for high position in the competition with air condition.
And he was right. The song finished 15th out of 18 in semifinal 1 with only 20 points. Although for the record, 2 of the 3 songs it beat are cheeseball Eurovision classics that I still listen to all the time. Latvia's Beautiful Song finished in 16th place. And in last place was Austria's rump-shaking anthem, Woki mit dem Pupu. We doubt Rambo was disappointed by his Eurovision flameout. You remember his lyrics for Turbo Folk, right? He basically dismissed the contest as a celebration of the dumbest music imaginable. The fact that voters didn't appreciate what he was trying to say just proved he was right all along. Surprisingly, this would not be Rambo's only involvement with Eurovision. In 2018, he tried to represent Serbia, singing a duet with jazz singer Betty Dordovic. In a pre-show interview, he said, "Both Betty and I sincerely hope we won't win. She doesn't like traveling, and I don't go through the same psycho-glamour twice." The song finished 9th of 17 at the national selection show. Since then, Rambo's kept busy with a series of side projects like making a song for UNICEF about wearing masks to fight COVID.
Science, bro. What is false and what you can count on science.
Or campaigning against small hydroelectric dams in order to preserve wetland ecology.
Stop derivazioni mini hydroelectrana.
Or getting involved with Neolithic archaeology. It turns out that Rambo's father was actually one of Serbia's most famous archaeologists and cultural anthropologists. His face was on a postage stamp, guys. By now, we hope you've come to appreciate one of the most interesting performers ever to appear at Eurovision. And we hope you're just as disappointed in him as we are to hear that in 2023, he was convicted of sexual harassment.
No! God, please, no! No!
In March, a TV host accused him of touching her inappropriately. Rambo admitted it and apologized via Facebook, an apology that included the statement, "I can apologize to the young journalist honestly and deeply, but only with the note that I believe that something is wrong with her and that in my layman's opinion, she needs to be treated." Oh boy, that is not cool like a swimming pool, Amadeus. Unsurprisingly, she did not accept this apology, and in September, Rambo Amadeus pled guilty to harassment. It's a sad place to end this story, but it wouldn't be right not to mention it. We can still appreciate his music, but we're never going to hear it quite the same way anymore.
But what about the relationship between Montenegro and the EU? The month after Eurovision 2012, the EU's General Affairs Council officially opened accession negotiations. That was 12 years ago, and Montenegro still isn't part of the EU. But negotiators say it could maybe happen in 2025. Maybe. We'll see you next time. Why does it take so long to join the EU anyway? I think if your prime minister can master the secret EU handshake, that should be enough to prove you're serious.